Story 1: The Barn House Mystery. I grew up on a sprawling piece of land just outside Boulder, Colorado, where my family owned a large property that stretched across several acres, dotted with fields of alfalfa swaying in the breeze. Our main house was a 2-story structure with a big second-floor window that overlooked the fields, but a few hundred yards away stood the barn house, an old, weathered building we used to rent out to people needing a temporary place to stay. It was a simple structure, built in a barn style with wooden walls and a slanted roof, its red paint peeling from years of sun and wind. My room faced that barn house, and as a kid, I'd often stare out my window at night, the dark silhouette, a quiet companion under the starry sky. I was about 12 years old when the strangest chapter of our lives began. It was a quiet life back then. My dad, a burly man named Tom, who worked as a mechanic, and my mom, Linda, a school teacher with a warm smile, kept the family running smoothly. We'd occasionally rent out the barn house to travelers or folks down on their luck, the income a small help with the property taxes. One night, around 11:30 p.m., a knock at our front door broke the silence. I peeked from my room as Dad opened it, revealing a young man, maybe in his late 20s, with matted hair and a scruffy beard, dressed all in black, jeans, hoodie, boots. He looked rough, like he hadn't slept in days, his eyes darting nervously as he asked, "Can I rent the barn house for a while? Just need a place to crash." Dad hesitated, sizing him up, but nodded. "Sure, it's $50 a week. Pay up front." The man handed over crumpled bills, introducing himself as Rick, and Dad gave him the key, pointing him toward the barn house across the field. Rick shuffled off, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, the fog from the nearby creek rolling in to swallow his figure. I watched from my window, the barn house dark, its windows blank, and thought little of it. Another tenant, another story. But over the next 3 months, something changed. It started a week after Rick moved in, on a Sunday night around midnight. I couldn't sleep, the heat of the late summer pressing against my skin, and I wandered to my window, the field bathed in moonlight. A group of figures, 5 or 6, all dressed in black, emerged from the fog, moving silently toward the barn house. They carried no lanterns, their shapes blending into the night, and I waited for the lights to flick on inside, but they never did. The door creaked open, swallowing them, and the house remained dark, a black hole in the field. I told my parents the next morning, my voice shaky. "I saw people going into the barn house last night, but no lights came on." Dad chuckled. "Probably just Rick having friends over, kid. Don't worry." Mom nodded, but her eyes lingered on the window, a flicker of doubt in her expression. This happened again, every Sunday or Monday night. The same ritual, figures in black, midnight arrivals, no lights, no sound. I'd stay awake, my forehead pressed to the cold glass, watching until exhaustion pulled me under, never seeing them leave. My parents brushed it off, blaming my imagination, and I stopped mentioning it. The barn house, a mystery I couldn't solve. Rick paid his rent sporadically. His visits to our house rare. His demeanor quiet but edgy, like he was hiding something. The field between us felt alive, the alfalfa whispering in the wind, and I started to dread those nights. The darkness of the barn house a weight on my chest. One evening, about 3 months in, Dad noticed Rick hadn't paid in weeks. "I'll go talk to him," he said, grabbing his coat, his voice gruff. I watched from my window as he crossed the field, the fog thicker now, the barn house a shadow against the gray. He knocked, the door ajar, and stepped inside, disappearing for what felt like forever. When he returned, his face was pale, his hands trembling, and he didn't say a word to me, just went straight to Mom in the kitchen. I crept closer, eavesdropping as he whispered, his voice low. The smell hit me first. Foulest thing I've ever encountered, like death itself. The door was open, and inside, the walls were covered in scribbles, red and brown, like some hieroglyphic code drawn with crayons. Clothes piled in the corner, stinking, furniture shoved into the kitchen, the water running, the toilet and tub used as a toilet, and in the back, carcasses, reptiles, dozens, piled in a blood circle. Mom gasped, her hand to her mouth, and Dad continued, "I didn't touch anything. Called the cops." The next day, police swarmed the property, their cars kicking up dust, and we moved out a month later. The barn house sealed off, never rented again. Years later, visiting the abandoned land, I saw the barn house partly demolished, our old home overrun with weeds, a ghost of our past. The memory of those figures, the stench, the blood circle, still lingers, a mystery unsolved, a shadow on the field that I can't forget. The morning after my dad discovered the horrors in the barn house, the alfalfa field outside our Boulder, Colorado home buzzed with activity, a stark contrast to the eerie silence that had cloaked it for months. I woke to the sound of sirens, the red and blue lights of police cars flashing through the fog that clung to the ground, turning the field into a ghostly expanse. From my second-floor window, I watched as officers swarmed the barn house, their voices muffled, their movements hurried. My dad stood on the porch, his arms crossed, his face pale as he spoke to a tall officer with a clipboard, while my mom kept me and my younger sister, Ellie, inside, her hands trembling as she poured cereal we didn't touch. "Don't go out there," she said, her voice tight, her eyes darting to the window. the barn house a dark silhouette against the gray dawn. I pressed my face to the glass, watching as the police taped off the area, yellow caution tape fluttering in the wind like a warning. Officers came and went, some carrying bags, others taking photos, their faces grim. One emerged from the barn house, holding what looked like a bundle wrapped in plastic, his expression a mix of disgust and shock. And I remembered Dad's whispered words to Mom. Carcasses, reptiles, a blood circle. My stomach turned. The image of Rick, the tenant with matted hair and darting eyes, flashing in my mind. Where was he? Had he fled in the night, leaving behind that nightmare? The police stayed for hours, their questions sharp as they interviewed Dad, who repeated the story. Rick's late rent, the foul smell, the open door, the walls scribbled with red and brown symbols, the furniture misplaced, the bathroom a cesspool, and the pile of dead reptiles in a circle of blood. We'll investigate, the lead officer, a man named Hargrove with a gray mustache and a tired gaze, told Dad. Looks like some kind of ritual, maybe drugs. We've seen weird stuff before, but this is something else. They searched for Rick, but he was gone, his duffel bag missing, the barn house a crime scene now, its secrets laid bare under the morning light. We didn't sleep that night, the house filled with a tense quiet, the field outside a void I couldn't stop watching. Ellie clung to her stuffed bear, her eyes wide, whispering, "Who was he, Caleb?" I didn't have an answer, just held her hand. The bat I'd kept by my bed, a cold comfort. The next day, Mom and Dad decided we couldn't stay. Too many questions, too much fear. We packed in a hurry, our belongings stuffed into boxes. The barn house a forbidden zone we never approached again. A month later, we moved to a new house in town, closer to neighbors, the field and its secrets, a memory we tried to bury. Dad never rented out any property again. The barn house sealed off, its windows boarded, its door padlocked. Years passed, the incident fading into the haze of childhood, a story I rarely told, the kind of thing you push down deep, hoping it stays buried. I grew up, moved away for college, became an engineer, but the barn house lingered in my mind, a shadow I couldn't shake. At 18, I drove back to the old property on a whim, the road familiar yet foreign, the alfalfa field, now overgrown with weeds, the barn house partly demolished, its walls sagging, the roof caved in. Our old house stood abandoned, the windows shattered, vines crawling up the siding, the place a ghost of itself, as if the land had rejected us after what we'd let in. I parked near the field, the air cool, the sky gray, and stepped out, the crunch of gravel under my boots the only sound. The barn house loomed, its broken frame a skeleton against the horizon, and I felt it, a chill, a weight, the same unease I'd felt as a kid watching those figures in black. I walked closer, the caution tape long gone, the ground littered with debris, shards of glass, a rusted nail, a faded crayon, red and melted into the dirt. The smell hit me, faint but unmistakable. The same foul stench Dad had described, a mix of decay and something chemical seeping from the ruins. I didn't go inside, didn't dare, but as I turned to leave, a sound stopped me, a faint creak like a door swinging on its hinges, coming from the barn house. My heart raced and I spun, the field empty, the wind whispering through the weeds. But the creak came again, rhythmic, deliberate. I thought of Rick, his darting eyes, the figures in black, the blood circle, and wondered if they'd ever left, if the barn house held them still, a portal to something dark. I ran to my car, the engine roaring as I sped away, the ruin shrinking in my rear view, but the chill stayed, a cold hand on my neck. Now, at 18, I still see it in my dreams, those figures, the barn house, the smell, and wake with a start, the creak echoing in my mind. My parents never speak of it, but I know they feel it too. The shadow of that summer, a mystery we'll never solve. The land is abandoned, the barn house a ruin. But I wonder, what did Rick bring there? What did he leave behind? And will it ever truly let us go? Story 2. The Man by the Pool Lot. Growing up in a gated community on the edge of Fort Collins, Colorado, was like living in a bubble, safe, predictable, the kind of place where kids roamed free on their bikes, and parents didn't worry too much about locking doors. The summer I turned 10 was a golden blur of long days and warm nights. The air filled with the scent of freshly cut grass and the hum of cicadas in the towering pines that lined our neighborhood. My name's Lucas Bennett, and back then I was a scrawny kid with a mop of brown hair and a gap-toothed grin, always trailing behind my best friend, Ethan Parker, who lived next door. Ethan was a year older, taller, with freckles across his nose and a fearless streak that made him the leader of our little gang of neighborhood kids. That summer day in 2014 started like any other. The sun blazing high in a cloudless sky, the heat shimmering off the asphalt. Ethan's family was hosting a big gathering in their backyard, a sprawling space with a barbecue pit, picnic tables, and a bounce house for the younger kids. My family joined in, my mom, Karen, bringing her famous potato salad, and my dad, Mike, cracking open a beer as he chatted with Ethan's dad about the Rockies' latest game. Ethan introduced me to his cousins, nieces, and nephews, a swarm of kids, most younger than us, their laughter filling the air as they played tag and splashed in kiddie pools. There was Mia, a 6-year-old with pigtails, who loved chasing butterflies, and Jake, a 4-year-old with a gap-toothed smile who clung to Ethan's leg, calling him Ethan. As the afternoon stretched into evening, the adults sipping lemonade and the smell of grilled burgers wafting through the air, Ethan and I decided to take the younger kids on a bike ride. "Let's go to the pool lot," Ethan suggested, his eyes lighting up, and I nodded, always up for an adventure with him. The pool lot was a wide, open space next to the community swimming pool, just around the corner from Ethan's house, near a large hill that sloped down to a cul-de-sac. It was our favorite spot to ride, flat, spacious, with plenty of room to race our bikes in circles, though it was a bit out of sight from the adults' watchful eyes. Another friend, Tommy, lived right next to the pool, so we figured it'd be fine, even if the hill blocked the view from the gathering. We gathered the kids, Mia, Jake, and 2 other cousins, 7-year-old Liam and 5-year-old Sophie, each on their little bikes with training wheels, helmets strapped tight. Ethan led the way, his red bike gleaming in the sunlight, while I followed, keeping an eye on the younger ones, their giggles trailing behind us as we pedaled down the street. The pool lot was empty when we arrived, the pavement warm under our sneakers, the hill casting a long shadow as the sun dipped lower. We started riding in circles, Ethan shouting, "Race you to the edge," while Mia squealed, trying to keep up, and Jake wobbled on his tiny bike, his tongue sticking out in concentration. I was laughing, chasing after Liam, when I noticed him, a man standing near the hill, a large, burly figure with broad shoulders and a faded baseball cap pulled low over his face. At his heels was a dog, a big German shepherd with no leash, its ears perked, its eyes fixed on us. My stomach tightened. Our neighborhood was closed off, a gated community where everyone knew everyone, and the HOA had strict rules. Dogs had to be on leashes, and strangers weren't common. I didn't recognize this guy, and his presence felt wrong, like a crack in the bubble we lived in. Ethan noticed too, slowing his bike, his grin fading as he glanced over, but he shrugged, probably just a new guy visiting someone. The man started talking to Mia, his voice low, but carrying over the quiet lot. "Hey, little girl, can you call my dog over? He likes kids, but he's disobedient. Won't come back to me." Mia, always eager to help, stopped her bike, her pigtails bouncing as she nodded. "Okay." But the dog wasn't disobedient. It was right at the man's heels, sitting obediently, its tail still. Something about the man's tone, the way he stood too close to the edge of the lot, made my skin crawl. I pedaled over, my heart starting to pound, and called out, "Mia, let's go. We need to get back." She looked at me, confused, but started to turn her bike. The man's head tilted, his cap shadowing his eyes, and he took a step closer to Mia, his hand reaching out slightly. "Come on, just call him. He won't bite," he said, his voice softer, but there was an edge to it, a hunger I couldn't name. I felt a wave of panic, my instincts screaming, and I grabbed Ethan's arm, whispering, "Something's wrong. We need to go. Now." Ethan frowned but nodded, sensing my fear, and started rounding up the younger kids, Jake, Liam, Sophie, casually saying, "Let's head back for ice cream," to avoid alarming them in case the man decided to chase us. I grabbed Mia's hand, pulling her bike along, my own wobbling as I tried to maneuver both. She protested, "But the dog," and I snapped, "No, we're leaving," dragging her faster. My legs burned, the group pedaling down the hill, but I made the mistake of stopping at the bottom, glancing back. The man hadn't moved. He stood under the fading sunlight, the dog still at his heels, staring straight at me, his cap tilted up now, revealing a pair of dark, unblinking eyes that locked onto mine. A chill ran through me, freezing me in place, and then he took a step forward, the dog's ears twitching, its body tense, ready to spring. Lucas Bennett pedaled furiously down the hill from the pool lot in Fort Collins, Colorado, his heart hammering as the man's unblinking stare burned into his memory, those dark eyes locking onto him with an intensity that chilled his blood. The group, Ethan Parker, Mia, Jake, Liam, and Sophie, raced ahead, their bikes wobbling under the weight of fear, the pavement a blur beneath their wheels. The summer sun was sinking, casting long shadows from the hill, the gated community's quiet streets now a maze of potential danger. Ethan shouted, "Keep going," his voice tight, and Lucas glanced back. His mistake. The man was still there, one step forward, the German shepherd's muscles tensing, its growl a low rumble that carried over the distance. Mia's pigtails bounced as she pedaled, tears streaking her cheeks. "Why are we running?" she whimpered, but Lucas didn't answer, his grip tight on her handlebars, dragging her along. The dog hadn't moved, but the man's presence felt closer, his silhouette a shadow against the fading light, his cap tilted as if tracking them. Ethan led the group toward his house, the backyard gathering a beacon of safety, the adults' voices a distant promise. Lucas's legs burned, the adrenaline masking the soreness from the trampoline park, and he called out, "Faster, Ethan! Get the little ones home!" The younger kids, Jake, Liam, and Sophie, struggled to keep up, their training wheels clattering, their cries mixing with the cicadas' hum. They rounded the corner, Ethan's house in sight, the barbecue pit smoking, the adults laughing over beers, oblivious to the terror unfolding. Lucas stopped at the edge of the yard, panting, pulling Mia close, the others tumbling in behind him. Ethan ran to his dad, Mr. Parker, a broad man with a sunburned face, shouting, "There's a guy by the pool lot trying to get Mia." Mr. Parker's smile faded, and he grabbed his phone, dialing 911 as the group spilled their story. The man, the dog, the weird request, Lucas's panic. My parents, Karen and Mike, rushed over, Karen's face pale, Mike's fists clenched, and I stammered. He stared at me, took a step, like he was going to follow. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers in crisp uniforms, their cruiser's lights flashing red and blue across the yard. Officer Ramirez, a young woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, and Officer Daniels, an older man with a weathered face, listened as we recounted the encounter. Mia clinging to her mom, Jake hiding behind Ethan's dad. "We'll check it out," Ramirez said, her tone calm but firm, and they drove to the pool lot, returning after 20 minutes with grim expressions. "No sign of the guy," Daniels reported, but the dog's tracks were fresh. Big shepherd, no leash. Could be a drifter, maybe trouble. Keep the kids close. The gathering ended early. The mood shattered, and my parents took me home. The house suddenly too quiet. The windows a vulnerability I hadn't noticed before. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying the man's stare, the dog's tension, the way he'd singled out Mia. Karen sat with me, her hand on mine. "You did the right thing, Lucas." But her eyes darted to the window, the street dark beyond the curtains. Mike called the HOA, reporting the stranger, and they promised to patrol. But the unease lingered, a shadow in my mind. Days turned to weeks, the pool lot avoided, my bike rides limited to the driveway, always with an adult nearby. Ethan and I talked about it, his bravado shaken, and the younger kids stopped asking to play outside after dark. Then, one evening in August, as the summer waned, I saw him again, standing at the edge of our street. The same man, cap low, dog at his heels, watching our house. I froze, my heart racing, and ran inside, locking the door, my parents calling the police. The officers found nothing. The street empty, but the sighting spread through the neighborhood. Whispers of a weird guy, with a dog fueling the tension. The HOA tightened security, cameras installed, but I never strayed far from older company. After that, the memory of Mia's near encounter, a warning, etched into my bones. Years later, at 16, I still feel it. On quiet nights, a rustle in the yard, a shadow by the window, the man's stare haunting my dreams. Fort Collins remained safe, the bubble intact, but that summer day by the pool lot left a mark, a fear that lingers, a stranger's intent I'll never fully understand, a shadow that might still be out there, waiting. Story 3: The Shadow at the Sink. In the heart of New Orleans, Louisiana, where the summer air was thick with humidity and the scent of magnolias mingled with the faint tang of the Mississippi River, our family lived in a quaint two-story house on a quiet street in the Garden District. I was 5 years old in the summer of 1999. A small boy named Julien LeBlanc, with a mop of curly black hair and wide brown eyes that took in the world with a mix of wonder and fear. My family was close-knit. My mom, Elise, a nurse with a gentle touch and a smoking habit she couldn't quite kick. My dad, Marcel, a carpenter with calloused hands and a deep laugh. And my brother, Pierre, 4 years my senior, a 9-year-old with a protective streak and a love for comic books. We spoke French at home, a nod to our Cajun roots, and our house was filled with the sounds of laughter and the occasional argument in our native tongue. That summer evening, a thunderstorm rolled in, the kind that turned the sky a bruised purple and sent lightning flashing like jagged scars across the horizon. The heat upstairs was unbearable, the humidity clinging to our skin, making sleep impossible in our attic bedrooms. Pierre and I begged Dad to let us sleep downstairs, where the air was cooler, and after a moment's thought, he agreed. "You can sleep on the couch in the living room," he said, his voice warm but firm. "But I'll be on the dining room couch, just in case you get scared." Pierre and I were always terrified of sleeping alone, especially downstairs, where the shadows seemed to stretch longer in the dark, and thunderstorms only made it worse. We set up our makeshift beds, Pierre on one end of the living room couch and me on the other, our feet touching for comfort, a habit we developed during stormy nights. Pierre faced the living room window, which looked out onto the front yard, the glass streaked with rain, while I faced the kitchen, the open layout of our house connecting the living room, dining room, and kitchen in a big circle around a central staircase. The storm raged outside, thunder rumbling like a giant's growl, lightning illuminating the room in brief, stark flashes. Mom kissed us goodnight, her cigarette smoke lingering as she went upstairs. Dad settling on the dining room couch with a blanket, his snores soon a steady rhythm. I drifted in and out of sleep, the storm's fury a restless lullaby, until I woke with a start, the room bathed in the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the cleared skies. The storm had passed, leaving the house quiet, the air cooler, the moon bright enough to cast soft shadows across the hardwood floor. I rolled over, my eyes adjusting, and that's when I saw it. A dark figure standing in the kitchen at the sink, facing the window above it. The moonlight outlined its shape, tall and thin, with a feminine curve that made me think of Mom. A stream of slow-moving smoke rose above its head, curling lazily in the air, and I relaxed for a moment, assuming it was her, up for a late-night cigarette. "Mom?" I called out, my voice small, barely above a whisper, expecting her to turn with a smile. Nothing happened. No movement, no response, just the smoke drifting upward, the figure still as stone. I tried again, louder. Dad? Thinking maybe it was him, checking the house after the storm. But the silence stretched, heavy and wrong. The figure didn't fit Dad's broad frame, and a small voice in my head whispered that it looked more like a woman, though I couldn't shake the unease creeping up my spine. I called out one last time, Tante, aunt in French, thinking of my Tante Marie, who sometimes stayed over, her warm hugs a comfort during storms. But the figure didn't answer, didn't move, and the air grew colder, the moonlight dimming as if a cloud had passed over. Then, slowly, agonizingly slowly, the figure began to turn, its head tilting first, then its body, a deliberate rotation that made my heart pound. It bent down, its arms opening wide, the stance eerily, like someone waiting to catch a child running for a hug. But there was nothing warm about it. The moonlight caught its shape, but I couldn't see a face, just a dark void where one should have been, the smoke curling thicker now, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place, something sharp, like decay. I realized with a jolt, this wasn't Mom, wasn't Dad, wasn't Tante Marie. It wasn't anyone who lived in this house. Panic seized me, my 5-year-old mind racing, my body frozen on the couch. The figure was about 20 feet away, the kitchen open to the living room, the dining room a circle around the staircase in the center. If I ran upstairs to my parents, I'd have to pass through the kitchen, around the dining room, and up the stairs. Too far, too exposed. I imagined it chasing me, its arms reaching through the staircase's open sides, grabbing my leg as I climbed, pulling me into the dark. Pierre stirred beside me, his breathing soft, still asleep, and I wanted to scream, to wake him, but my voice was stuck, my body trembling, the figure's presence a weight that pinned me down. Julien Leblanc lay frozen on the living room couch in his New Orleans home, the moonlight casting eerie shadows across the hardwood floor, his 5-year-old heart pounding as the dark figure in the kitchen loomed, its arms outstretched in a mockery of a welcoming embrace. The air was thick with a cold that seeped into his bones, the faint scent of decay replacing the familiar warmth of his mother's cigarette smoke, and the figure's silence was louder than any thunder from the earlier storm. Pierre, his older brother, slept beside him, oblivious to the terror unfolding, his soft snores a cruel reminder of Julien's isolation in that moment. The figure hadn't responded to his calls. Mom, Dad, Tante. Its slow turn and bent posture, a chilling confirmation that this was no one he knew. Julien's mind raced, his small body trembling, The open layout of the house a trap he couldn't escape. The kitchen, dining room, and living room formed a circle around the central staircase. The path to his parents' bedroom, upstairs, a gauntlet he'd have to run. Past the kitchen, through the dining room, up the stairs, with the figure blocking his way. He imagined it lunging, its shadowy arms snatching his legs through the open staircase, pulling him into the dark, its faceless void swallowing him whole. His voice was stuck, a scream trapped in his throat, and he squeezed his eyes shut, willing the figure to disappear, praying it was a dream. But the cold didn't lift. The scent of decay grew stronger, and when he opened his eyes, the figure was still there, its arms still wide, its presence a weight that pressed against his chest. Seconds stretched into an eternity, the moonlight dimming further, the house creaking as if it, too, felt the intruder's presence. Then, a sound broke the silence. Pierre stirring, his foot brushing against Julien's, his voice groggy. "Julien, what's wrong?" The figure didn't move, didn't react, but Julien's fear exploded into action. His small body lunging off the couch, his bare feet slapping the hardwood as he bolted for the stairs. "Papa!" he screamed, his voice piercing the night, the word a lifeline as he ran, not daring to look back. Pierre woke fully, sitting up, his eyes wide as he saw the empty kitchen. But Julien was already halfway up the stairs, the figure's presence a shadow at his back. He burst into his parents' bedroom, the door slamming against the wall, and threw himself onto the bed, shaking Elise awake. "Papa! Maman! There's someone in the house," he sobbed, his words tumbling out in a mix of French and English, his small hands clutching at her nightgown. Elise sat up, her eyes bleary, cigarette smoke lingering on her breath, and Marcel jolted awake beside her, his face hardening as Julien's panic sank in. "What do you mean, Julien?" he asked, already reaching for the pistol he kept in the nightstand, a precaution in a city where shadows sometimes held more than just darkness. Julien tried to explain, his voice trembling. "In the kitchen, at the sink, a lady, but not a maman. She turned, and she wasn't right." Marcel didn't hesitate, grabbing the gun and heading downstairs, his bare feet heavy on the steps, Elise following with a flashlight, her hand on Julien's shoulder. Pierre joined them, rubbing his eyes. "I didn't see anything," he mumbled, but Julien's fear was contagious. The house's silence, now a threat. Marcel searched room by room, living room, dining room, kitchen, basement. The flashlight's beam cutting through the dark, but the kitchen was empty, the sink dry. No smoke, no figure. Every door was locked, the windows secure. No sign of entry, the air heavy with the storm's aftermath, but nothing more. Elise held Julienne close, her voice soothing. It was just a dream, mon petit. But her eyes darted to the shadows, her grip tight. Marcel returned, the pistol lowered. Nothing here, kiddo. You're safe. Julienne nodded, wanting to believe them, but he knew what he'd seen. The slow turn, the outstretched arms, the faceless void. And it wasn't a dream. They all slept in the master bedroom that night. Pierre snoring softly, Elise stroking Julienne's hair. But he couldn't close his eyes. The figure silhouette etched into his memory, the scent of decay lingering in his nose. 2 years later, in 2001, my parents split up. Dad's temper, Mom's exhaustion, and the house was sold. We moved to a smaller place across town. The Garden District, a memory I tried to forget. The new owners, a young couple with a son, Nathan, a year ahead of me at school, moved in, and I never thought I'd see that house again. But in 2003, Nathan approached me at recess, his face pale, his voice low. "Hey, Julian, did you ever see anything weird in that house?" My stomach dropped, and I nodded, barely breathing. "Last night, I woke up, and there was a figure. It came through my closet, stood at my bed, staring at me for like 30 seconds, then walked back into the closet without opening the door." I froze, the memory rushing back, the kitchen, the sink, the shadow, and I knew he'd seen it too. The same thing, the same terror. I never went back to that house. The thought of it a knot in my gut. Now, at 30, the memory is as clear as it was at 5. The figures turn, the moonlight, the cold, and I still wake some nights. The scent of decay, faint in the air. The feeling of being watched, a shadow I can't shake. New Orleans holds its ghosts, and that house on the quiet street, with its open layout and creaking stairs, holds one I'll never forget, a presence that lingers, waiting for someone new to claim.